Welcome to the Teaching Bites podcast. Here are your hosts, Fred and Sharon Jaravada.
And welcome to our show. This is the Teaching Bites podcast, where we connect you with people and ideas to take your teaching to the next level. I'm your host, Fred Jaravada, and today I have a special guest, and her name is Rachel McIntire, and I work with her in the Schools of Sacred Heart. She teaches at the high school, Convent High School, and she is the department chair of the Fine and Performing Arts at our schools. She also has a master's from Harvard University. She is also a founder of 2 nonprofit groups. Is that right?
I've helped to found a couple, of one primarily. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming by. All right, Rachel. So my little intro was definitely not the full story. Can you share your origin story with us?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to share stories with you. I'm really excited to use this space and be part of your podcasting.
Well, I know you're a big podcast listener too, right?
Oh, you have no idea. From about 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. is my podcast hours.
Well, we'll get your favorite podcast out there so people can listen also. Cool. But go ahead and your origin story. Where are you from? What are you doing?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm a California kid. I was born in Northern California in rural towns. Lived in several rural towns, and then came to San Francisco about 14 years ago. After college. And began working in nonprofit capacities, mostly in the Peninsula. Was an art director for the Boys and Girls Club of the Peninsula for several years. That really inspired me as an artist and an educator. And from there, I went to grad school. As you said, I went over to Harvard, to the East Coast.
That little school over there, right?
That little school over there. That funny thing, I knew nothing. I mean, I knew it was a great school, and I applied to several great schools. But I accepted blindly and had never been there. So I literally ended up at the Harvard Yard after being in Honduras, working in rural Honduras for 3 months. So it was an interesting culture shock.
What did you do there in Honduras?
In Honduras?
Yeah,
sure. So while I was working in East Palo Alto and East Menlo Park at the Boys and Girls Club, met some wonderful people who were doing work with a small community in the coast of Honduras, and they invited me and some friends of mine down to do a mural project. So it wasn't art people that invited us, but they'd seen several places throughout Latin America the power of mural art. So went down there and began working with the community. And the first project that we did, we actually painted a school bus that had been donated, and it looked like a little hippie bus.
Was that TV show?
The Magic School Bus?
The Magic School Bus is one. I'm thinking about the old 1960s, maybe early 70s school bus, the Partridge Family.
Oh, yeah. It was more like that one. But the kids loved it. I wouldn't say it was the most artistically beautiful. But from that, we continued to work with that community and the schools there. So I had been down there doing a project, and then had kind of took my flight directly from Honduras to Boston. And so ended up there and studied. And then from there went back to Latin America, worked in Mexico for a while, and actually in South Korea, and then came back to the Bay Area.
Wow, you have a whole worldwide experience. That's amazing.
I'm very interested in, my questions continue, but at that time I was just really interested in how different cultural situations and how those impact student learning, specifically within the imagination and creative expression. So at the time, I had a lot of freedom, and I was just trying to go to as many places as I could and work with communities, and just kind of felt like I was more of an educational anthropologist at the time.
That's very cool. I like that phrase, that educational anthropologist. I like that a lot. Can you share what you do with the visual, the performing arts, and how you integrate that, or your experience with that?
Yeah. So I've been at Convent for 9 years now. and have just recently changed my role to not just be the chair of the high school, but as we're rethinking our K through 12 education, I'm now serving as the chair of actually just visual art. And my experience has been, primarily with the girls' high school. So in terms of how I integrate my philosophies of education and art, I really believe in the relationships you create with your students. And so I think that that's kind of my foundation of creating a place that's safe, where you get into the messy stuff as quick as you can. And from the messy stuff, I think then you start pushing forward in different directions to get to the end. So that could be an end product. It could be an end question. You could start all over again with another question. So I really try to stay in the generative space with the work that I do in the curriculum developing. So the big ideas you have and you hold, and then you work in relationship with your students to get to the end.
Right.
Or the beginning.
Right, or the beginning, go back. And that's the great thing about art. And you get to explore different avenues, different ways of thinking also, which is part of the whole STEM movement happening out there, and whole design thinking about using that. Can you, let me back up. So how did you get interested in teaching?
Yeah, I think that it wasn't something that I ever actually thought about that I wanted to teach. I just began teaching. So this started even back in high school. I was, always involved with different groups and peer counseling and peer education and leading clubs. So that just continued to happen. And then I started studying design. I was really interested in interior design and architecture. And it wasn't enough. I really missed working more with community and with young people. So then I did a double major with education and design. And from there, I've just kind of continued to work in the capacity as an educator.
Can you speak a little bit about the design, your design experience, and how it actually fits in education?
Mm-hmm. Well, as you mentioned, the whole STEAM movement, which has been going for some time and going strong, I'm really excited about that, because I think that it formalizes what already exists with the different ways that you think if you're working more in the STEM capacity or the art and design capacity. So I think formalizing that within, making a STEAM movement really leverages the processes that are involved in both practices. So when you get them together, and we're actually looking a lot with our, mostly in the high school right now, but really looking at what our STEAM project would be, or our STEAM program would be, to make it authentic, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can approach that. But what we're looking at is what do we share? What do we share as far as a lab practice and a studio practice? And what can we learn from integrating those two?
Right.
And so you are a scientist and an artist, right?
Right.
They work together.
And they both experiment.
They both experiment. They both ask questions. They both look for flexibility. They enter at places of the unknown. The research can be really similar as far as testing things out, creating hypotheses, and then trying it out.
Now that, like you said, the STEAM movement has been going on strong. What are the challenges of it? And not just the whole STEAM, but in particular, the whole fine arts and the visual arts in our schools.
Well, I think some of the challenges is within the definition, and finding a definition that fits. So, again, it can be something where you bring in scientists to the art studio, and they share what they're doing, which is something that we've done. We've actually been bringing in our chemistry teacher. We have a new chemistry teacher who's quite fantastic, Mr. Mobley, and he does chemistry of colors with the girls. So when we're studying paint, they learn the chemicals behind it. And so we're actually making the paint and looking that these were the paints actually used by Monet when they actually had to, they couldn't go to Blick and buy the paints. So that gives one side of it. But then we also do other things where we bring in artists that work more in the other side of the practice, more as scientists. So that's one way. There's another way to integrate it into curriculum. So I see it as different touch levels, right? Like there's exposure, there's actual practice, and then there's deep into curriculum. So if we, if we really are serious about doing some deep learning, I think that we have to look at structurally how do we make space within the year? How do we make time for these really deep projects to transpire? So then that throws you back to the whole collaboration, right? Like you need to have space and time for that.
Space and time. And a lot of the schools are being challenged with that, the space and time. I'm going to get to that in a moment. But can you share a story, the aha moment, I like to ask teachers, that moment of like, oh, wow. And I know you said that you've been basically in education since you were in high school. Mm-hmm. Was there a moment that you realized, or the aha moment you realized, like, yep, this is for me. This is it.
Well, I feel fortunate that I have a lot of them. And the good thing is they keep happening.
That's good.
So I know I'm in the right place, which is a good thing. But what I think of one that really stands out, and it was about teaching and also about the power of art and relationships. At the time when I was in Mexico City, I was doing a fellowship working with this program called ProBem that was basically looking at different states within Mexico and children that were due to different reasons for immigration. It was looking at their education in Mexico and the United States. So it was this really huge project that not much was happening. So I ended up working with homeless youth. So by homeless youth, I mean anywhere from age 2 to 25. Wow. And it's a huge problem in Mexico City at the time. I think there was over 50,000 homeless people it's obviously an enormous city, but everywhere. So I started working with homeless youth, and through that experience was able to get some funding from the city, working with artists to kind of work with them to address issues of what they needed in terms of shelter and emotional support. So in bringing in a variety of artists, from architects to clowns to painters, one painter was working with people doing portraits of them. And I was just completely stopped watching him draw this one woman, and they were just staring at one another. Mm-hmm. And tears started running down her face because she hadn't been looked at. She hadn't been acknowledged for being a person. And then he was able to give her this portrait of her, so she saw herself. Wow. And it encompassed everything about the power of art and the power of them being together in that time. And it was this really special piece of paper.
Right. No, I'm just, when you were just talking about that, I just got a little chill in my spine, I'm like, okay, like some people, a lot of people in the world, they don't get acknowledged that they're there. Mm-hmm. And now this person you're saying painted her, and really looking deep in their eyes. And that's definitely the power of art. And definitely I'm very appreciative of all the artists out there. I think it really makes us human.
I agree.
I know this is off script, but can you name some favorite artists?
Favorite artists. I have way too many favorite artists.
Today.
Well, today, I love artists. Obviously, I love the friends that I have that are artists. So I have to say, recently we bring in visiting artists to our program. So we recently had Marissa John, who is an artist based in New York now, happens to be a good friend of mine, talk to the girls about her work as an activist and artist, and she's just fantastic and brilliant and does some really interesting work she's doing a project now called Care Force. So she started working with domestic laborers, and basically her work uses humor and design to draw attention to different things going on with different populations. So it was really great for her to share that work with the students and for them to see how they can use their creativity in different ways to really leverage what they want to say to make a point. Also had this really cool radical woman named Cassie Thornton come to visit the school, and her work deals with debt. With debt, the DEBT, what we don't want to talk about, right?
Right, no one's talking about that stuff. Wow, that was interesting.
So it was really interesting, and she again comes up with clever ways to address these things. So she, with the girls, created a beauty salon. Uh-huh. So the beauty salon was not about being beautiful, but it was about the beauty of knowledge. And so within the services, the girls had to come up with what they would want to offer. And they came up with some really clever stuff. We had a couple of students you would sit with them at their little booth, and they would ask you what you were missing in your life, and you could talk about, if you needed more time or something was going on in your relationships, and they would offer a book recommendation, and they would also offer a recipe for tea.
Wow,
so that
okay,
was their
that's cool.
services,
Right.
yeah. And in exchange, they wanted you to share something about yourself. So again, that one wasn't specifically about debt, but it was about exchange,
Right,
and
exchanging.
what is a different type of exchange, and what is the value of offering
Like a
your
transaction, like knowledge, right?
knowledge. Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
okay.
So
I
those
like
are
that.
two faves
Correct.
right now.
Nice. Okay. Is there a mantra or a quote that you are drawn to mostly, or
Yeah. I love quotes, but one that I go back to often, and it ties to what you were saying, that the arts can make us human, was said by a woman, a theorist, Maxine. What's her name? Maxine? I'm really
well, it's okay. You always give me the link later on, and I can put it in the show notes.
Well, yeah, and it's Maxine Green. I just drew a
Okay,
blank.
Mexican Queen. Okay.
Maxine Green. And what she said is that the arts allow us the capacity to think of things as though they were otherwise. So that just really harkens to the imagination, right? So
Right.
if you have that like freedom and that confidence in your freedom, you can build anything,
Right.
and you can make anything. The other one that is currently a mantra is by the author Brene Brown, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with her
No,
work
I'm
of
not.
Daring Greatly. She's awesome. Talks about vulnerability a lot, but she said unused creativity is not benign. So that's kind of the studio mantra that we use a lot. So if somebody's like, oh, I can't work, I have
Right.
nothing to do, unused creativity is not benign, and then they get to work.
Right. I have a lot of other questions, but that's gonna take us off our time with you. But I can also I'll try to get to them soon. Next question I had was about challenging situation, and especially with your students. Was there a challenging time that you can share about a student that didn't like the arts or didn't want to participate, or it doesn't have to be that, but was there a challenging moment in your teaching career, in your educational career, that really... Well, let me just give it to you that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think of a challenge that isn't as specific. It's a little more general, but it happens all the time.
Right.
So within the art practice, I feel like you get into the middle zone, and it's like walking through a bog, and it gets really heavy, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I try to change my mind. And that can happen with one work of art, or with our more advanced students when they're doing a series of artwork. So when we get to that place, it's kind of like you want to give up, or you don't like your work, or, it's just like heavy.
Right.
So at that point, I like to throw in the whole breakup. So like break up with your work, throw it away, tear it up, rethink it another way. And a lot of times it's just that conversation that helps students continue. But a lot of times it is just throwing it away. It's letting go of it.
Letting go. That's hard for a lot of people.
It is hard. It's hard to let go. And it's hard when you invest time to allow yourself
Right.
to not take yourself so seriously, to know that you're learning, you're in the process.
It's hard, and I think a lot of people will avoid it. They try to do something like drawing, and it doesn't come out the way they like it, and they'll just forget it.
Yeah.
That's a huge challenge. Wow. Okay. Yeah. And definitely, that is a really cool thing to think about. Books. I know you're an avid reader, right?
I tried it. Well, I used to be. Not anymore. I have a 2-year-old. No, I don't read anymore, but I used to be.
My next question is about books, or something, a movie, or some kind of medium that inspires you, that really inspires your teaching.
Okay. Well, that kind of goes back to artists that I like. I really like to listen to different, like, contemporary composers, especially in the studio. So one that really inspires me is it's called The Disintegration Loop.
Okay.
And it was composed by William Basinski, I think is how you pronounce his name. And what it is it's the sound of tapes deteriorating, and then he adds to it of just like old-fashioned tapes.
Okay.
So it's a loop I think it's about 6 minutes long, and it is
there's a recording on this tape.
Amazing. Yeah, I'll
And
send
this
it to you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Okay.
But it's just really powerful. It's almost like the beginning of, it's like the Big Bang.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And it's like the beginning and the end. I also really like to read Italo Calvino. I think he's a fantastic, he has a fantastic imagination. So whenever I have a little bit of time, I love Invisible Cities is a great book. And I really like the work of Janet Cardiff. She actually just recently had a sound installation at Fort Mason. And she just really is powerful in transforming space with installation and sound. So I really like stuff that encompasses you.
Right. Now, there's another off-script thing. Do you create also, besides just consume? I know you do.
Yeah.
Can you speak
I
about
do,
that a bit? Yes.
yeah. I like to do a lot of different things. I do right now because my teaching practice is my kind of creative expression.
Right, yeah.
But I do a lot of design. Really interested in architecture and interior design. So I will do projects. Most of my work right now is in collaboration with students. So it really is, like, for example, we just did a mural upstairs for our student support staff. And so it was working with alumna who came back and some of our current students. So we really work kind of equal creating something. So that's kind of my practice right now. But yeah, I like to do a lot of artist social practice. And so the artist that I mentioned before, we've done some different collaborations in the back, in the way back.
The way back. That's okay. I'm not editing that out. I'm keeping this in.
Way back when.
Way back when. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the beginning, top of the show, I mentioned that you founded or co-founded, or you were definitely involved in two or several nonprofits. Can you speak about those, please?
Yeah. So one of the nonprofits that I helped to found was long ago, about 14, 15 years ago, was the Mural Music and Art Project in East Palo Alto. So I was a founding artist, and that was a great organization that started with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Peanut butter and jelly. Speak about that. What's this about?
You have to feed kids in order to make... I mean, it's like you have to feed them to have creativity. So we were actually we hired them to paint murals, so to research design and paint murals. But we needed food. And so we would take turns making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to feed them in addition to paying them. And that project has grown tremendously. I think there's over 200 murals now throughout the Bay Area and have done some interesting international work. They now have expanded to develop a whole hip-hop program that's pretty spectacular.
Wow.
So now I help out with them, consulting with curriculum and supporting different artists.
Right.
The other project after grad school, I met this amazing poet named Amanda Lichtenstein while I was in grad school. And she and I were really interested in co-authorship, and so we founded Break Arts with the idea that we would work with different communities and educators to work with that idea to co-author the stories of our life. Right. And we continue to work together, and we've really let that be organic and project-based. So when she has worked a lot in Tanzania, so I had an opportunity to kind of collaborate with her with projects there, and then my work has been based in the Bay Area and more Latin America. So that work has kind of transpired.
That's awesome. Yes, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the point of the show where I talk about tech tools. What is your favorite tech tool? And when I say tech, it doesn't have to be the shiny new Apple logo or the Silicon Valley type of tool. It can be, definitely. But are there any other tools or tools that help you stay productive or and innovative, or even it just helps you?
I love Google Drive.
Okay.
It keeps me organized, and I think that's one of the things with my practice. I'm really organized, and it allows me to be flexible and creative. So that is a great tool.
So what are you putting in there? Like, not just the work files, but also like art
Yeah, I organize everything. So I communicate with my students via Google
Right.
Drive. They all have portfolios in there. So it's creating this archive. It's a great way for like the live, opportunity to work live. So for example, we just did this mural and all of the students would share the research that they were creating for the mural in this one space. They would share the images. And it was just the greatest way to have it all in one place and that you could
Right.
access it anywhere. So I think it's
Right.
a great tool. I'm really liking these whiteboards. I know it's low tech, but I think
Yeah.
the whiteboards that we've been doing on campus are fantastic. Just for again the same.
Can you
idea.
explain the whiteboards to our listeners?
Yeah, a little backstory. The whiteboards. So within our school's movement to touch and retouch all of our learning spaces, we have these incredible, huge whiteboard walls with brilliant expo colors that we can decorate them with.
Well, some of our kids down here at the elementary schools, they took some Sharpies.
Oh
to them.
man, they didn't know. That's hard.
Right.
I haven't had that happen yet. But no, the whiteboards are just
Right.
another way to get things literally on the walls.
Right.
And I think it's such a nice way to organize in a visual way to literally write it out. And I find it's just really helpful to have that tool.
Yes.
So kind of the contrast of the files, have it all internally in Google
Right.
Drive, and the opposite of just throw it out on the wall.
No, I definitely agree with you. That definitely the whiteboard I love a lot, and I wish I could take some home with me, but I'll make my own probably sometime. Okay. What motivates you during your teaching day?
To the tech right now. So I love to get completely immersed in a lot of different projects. What motivates me, I have my desk covered, my desktop covered with stickies of all the projects.
Oh, that's your computer. Okay, I've seen that.
Have you seen my computer?
I've seen that, yes. Before the room was split in half, I think.
Yeah. So I cover my desk with stickies of all the things that I'm doing, and what motivates me is to remove the stickies and recycle them.
So you're jotting ideas down and thoughts down, and you're sticking them on your computer.
I cover them so I can't work until I get things
Oh.
finished. So it's just this little game I play.
Oh, that's cool. Mm-hmm. It's a very cool productivity. I think that's a productivity
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a cool
Students
thing.
make fun of me.
Right.
They're like, you need to get rid of your stickies. You have way too many stickies. The other thing that motivates me is back to relationships, just to having the opportunity to sit and talk to my students. I have a lot
Right.
of students right now applying to art schools, applying to colleges,
That's awesome, yes.
and to work with them on their portfolios. And there's just this big leap they take at that level, where the conversations shift, and just to have that opportunity to experience that shift with them of
Right.
what they're able to talk about and where it's sending them next is just invaluable.
What is your take on the whole? What's the status, or what's the what's happening in the rest of the world, and are they embracing art, like in the public schools or in schools in general? How is that? What's happening in that world with art?
Well, I can't speak for the entire country.
Right. Yes, you can, actually. So.
No, I can say there's some really exciting stuff, like back to the STEAM. I had a really great opportunity last year to do some professional development work with the Ravenswood School District, just south of us in San Francisco. And the superintendent was fully embracing STEAM, fully embracing with VAPA, with the whole, within Obama. What is the name of Obama's the education? I just drew a blank.
It's the Race to the Top. Is it that
Is
one?
he the Race to the Top?
Yes.
Okay, I don't want to say that word. I'm just going to
Yeah,
say
I know.
that.
That's kind of. That's okay. We'll find it.
So their superintendent was fully bracing the whole STEAM movement, as
Right.
well as the visual and performing arts with the core, core education.
Oh, Common Core?
Common
Okay,
Core,
okay,
yeah. So within the Common Core, I had the opportunity to actually read the Common Core for the first time, and it's really strong. And so
Right.
I think that was such an incredible opportunity to work with this district who didn't have art specialists within the school, and then to have outside support. So there was a lot of outside support from Google and different tech corporations. So I think that is extremely exciting to me.
Why do you think tech companies are doing that?
They like STEAM. They understand. I mean, they understand the I mean, I almost think of it, they're wed, right?
Right.
If you're going to
There's a
work.
strong bond. There is a bond, a
Mhm.
connection, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, there was a report that came out years ago that was saying that the MFA is the new MBA, and just really recognizing that those skills that you learn, as far as flexibility, being able to be nimble, all the stuff that they talk about within, this new tech boom,
Right.
really is back to the creativity that you have, being able to generate a lot of ideas, move around and choose them, get rid of them when you need to.
Right.
Is a lot of the creative and design
I
practice.
read an article or maybe a YouTube video about how there's a fear of AI, artificial intelligence, and how humans won't be able to compete eventually, right? Taking our jobs, and they can do it so cheaply and faster and so on. But we need to react to that. Humans, we need to really tap into our creativity part. And I think a lot of companies, like you said, these tech companies realize that humans, our greatest gift, our greatest skill is art, really create things. And I think I definitely agree with you there, and how it's a really important art. Because I've seen some schools, and they are either got rid of the arts, and that was the whole the fear of like standardized testing and so on. But I also am reading more and more articles about the arts coming back.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think just as you're saying, I think that, I think about it, I mean, art and spirituality, right? Art and that it really is a connective tissue that connects us to ourselves, who we are as human beings, and to the world. And so I think that within your creative capacity, you're also able to communicate those things in different languages, right? And so I think that that's one of the things that I don't know anything about AI.
Right.
But in thinking about that, just being able to be authentic, to be human, as full as that can be, and not lose that as different, things do happen.
So how do you encourage students and adults saying, I'm not creative?
Yeah.
I'm not creative. I don't do art. I don't do that stuff.
Well, I mean, I think I think a lot about, just human development, right? We were all born singing and dancing and making marks, right? I mean, you see it, the first thing that a toddler, 10 months old, you grab something, you write with it, you start singing, you start dancing. And so my thing is, that's who we are as humans. We go through different things in our lives that might become dormant, but I think it's really important to keep cultivating that. And it kind of goes to creativity is not benign. What Brene Brown said, that it's our our human right to be creative and express who we are.
Yes. And like you, like I have two little ones, and you have a child also. How does that reflect, or how does that experience being a mother of a young child learning? How does that affect you? From a professional standpoint, right?
Well, it inspires me so much, and with my new role to think about learning, visual art learning, K through 12, I often envision my daughter, just because I'm close to really seeing her development.
Right.
So I think that it inspires me by proximity, really allowing me to experience it. Obviously, I can't go back to that.
Right,
I'd love to. When I like to think about, Picasso once said that he was always trying to draw like he did, or like children draw, right?
Yes.
So just that that openness that they have, that freedom. So I find that extremely inspirational.
And then they hit school, and then it stops.
Yeah, and just thinking about education in the grand sense, right? And how do we cultivate and make spaces for that?
You have to do that.
And work together. I mean, I think that it inspires me also to work with educators as well. Like thinking, wow, these all of the people that are going to take part in the education of my child. Like, it just makes me value obviously my colleagues, but just all educators. It really inspires me.
Right. What's one thing that you want to learn more about?
I am really interested in a lot of the neuroscience that's going on, of how we learn and just different development, because I think that it's great to have intuition. Like, I think that, act on intuition, but I love to have that other side of it.
Science-based research on that, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And there's a lot popping up now.
There's some great stuff out there.
Yes. There's a lot of research happening, and it's exciting. And just proving our point that art is hugely important for our development.
Yeah.
What's a project or something you're very proud of your teaching career so far? Something you're proud of. Or it could be many things also.
Yeah, what am I proud of? It's interesting. That's like not, my brain doesn't think in like pride. It thinks of excitement.
Okay. What are you excited about? Maybe I should rephrase the question. Yeah, rephrase the question.
Well, I get really excited about collaboration.
Yes.
So I get back to other things of learning. I'm really excited about within our school, all the different collaborations around space and the conversations around how do we best serve the needs of our community with addressing space. So I find that really exciting and very, I guess, proud to be part of that conversation.
What's your philosophy in space? Is it more, do you like to have bigger spaces, smaller spaces? What's your philosophy on that?
Well, I think that, obviously you start with whatever, if you're within a structure, you have to kind of address that, what exists first. I like open spaces. I really like flexible spaces. I think that shared spaces are great. I think the fact that if you have, and again, right now I'm just thinking within art studio space more than anything, I think it's great to have spaces where people can easily come into someone else's space and share and partake in whatever their practice is. I think there's a really nice kind of cross-pollination that just naturally happens from that, being able to, again, with open spaces and proximity. I think it's important to have a variety of different learning spaces, so whether it be what's comfortable to you or what is best for learning. So, for example, in the art studio, a lot of times I will have students intentionally stand up just because it's better for their bodies and it also is better for their brains, like thinking. So I try to have places to stand up. I try to have lounge spaces just for kind of hanging out, and then individual spaces for artists that work more productively when they're, with their headphones on doing their own project. So I think that's important with space.
That's very important.
Differentiated space.
Okay. So how do you inspire your students?
I try to inspire them by bringing in cool artists. I think that being a classroom teacher is such a wonderful opportunity because you get to really know your students. But I also think there's the opportunity to bring somebody from the outside that can share with them in a different way. So I think that is something that I find that often gives them inspiration. And bringing people that just do something completely different that they've never thought of. And I also think on the opposite of taking them out. So we recently took some students to Pier 9, to the Autodesk Pier 9.
Oh, yes. I'm going there in about a couple of weeks.
It is so awesome.
I'm heading there.
Yeah, it blew my mind, and I think it blew all of their minds just to see how things are made, and then to see the capacity of their residency program, of what artists are allowed when they're given, carte blanche. They can do whatever they want. There's no limits. So that was a wonderful one, taking them to artist studios. And so just, again, creating, opportunities for them to see all the incredible stuff that, we're fortunate to have in our backyard.
Now, we worked on a project last year. Was it last year? A 3D printing wearable project. Can you speak about that real quick?
Yeah, that was so fun.
Yes.
So with our new 3D printers, I really think it's interesting to compare different technologies. And so with that project, what it was, my freshman girls are very interested in fashion. So it was taking their interest in fashion and wearables. So they had the lo-fi that was like they had to create paper sculptures, wearable paper sculptures, and then the other side were to create accessories, wearable accessories that would work with that. So they were introduced to Tinkercad, but also paper and scissors and tape. And so it was just interesting for them to see as they went into three-dimensional design, the similarities in both. Whether you're working with your hands or you're working in Tinkercad, you're still thinking the same way. to create your end
Still think
product.
the same way.
Yeah, and they loved it. They did a great fashion
Yes,
show.
they did.
And
That
it
was really
good.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, time-saving tips. Teachers love time-saving tips. Do you have one?
No, do you have one? I would love a time-saving
Well,
tip.
as you know, we are a Google school. We use Google Apps in our schools, and you said you love Google Drive.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way you're organizing it especially? That's what you do with that.
Well, I do use it on my phone, so that's really nice
Okay.
that in transit I can, have Google Drive and my calendar. All of that is both on my desktop and my home. This isn't really, this is time saving. I've been trying I walk to work usually, and I try to make that time as like a walking meditation. So I see that as time saving
Right.
because it really allows me to empty
Right.
all the extraneous stuff.
Right.
And so when I get to work, I'm just ready to go.
Ready to go, yes.
So I think that's
And I think
time-saving.
that's a really good one because I think we're also always caught up in doing an app, right? The app of doing saving this time, right? But I like that you just empty out your brain a little bit and
Yeah.
just veg out a little bit, or not veg out, it's more intentional, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
Like today it was so nice. It was just kind of drizzling
Yes.
and just kind of be more
Feel the-
sensorial, right?
You
Yeah.
feel the rain coming down, the drizzle coming down.
Yeah.
What's the best advice you ever received?
I think hands down the best career advice I've ever received was from a professor who is now a friend and mentor, Steve Seidel. Was trying, just after grad school, was not sure what I wanted to do and was, working in a lot of nonprofits, interested in maybe nonprofit management, but was really interested in the work. And he just simply said, get to the work.
Right. Get to the work.
Get to the work. And anytime I get bogged down with the outside stuff, I just kind of say that to myself, like get to the
Yes.
work. And that's what should feed you and drive you.
Simple, very simple.
And try to minimize the other stuff. And so, yeah.
Simple and it's actionable. You just do it, right?
And
Very
that'll lead you in the right direction, right?
Right.
Like if you get to that. And so obviously the work can be many different things, but
Right. In turn, what advice do you give to teachers?
maybe I'm trying to to be in the same vein as my mentor, to staying in the work,
Right.
seeing what you love doing, and not allowing anything that maybe you don't love doing that could be part of your job description, but focusing on the work and what you love.
Right. Forget the distractions, right?
Yeah, and building, like I'm a big asset building, build what you love doing, and allowing that to, again, if you build it, that force is going to, push other things out of the way.
Right. You're doing amazing work and it's inspiring. You're one of the very few people that actually just had chills just earlier.
Ah, cool.
Very cool. Rachel, before we close out, is there any way that listeners can get in touch with you if they need to? Or they can come through me, but is there a way they can get in touch with you too if any questions of this show
Yeah,
that comes up?
Absolutely. I love to hear from anyone. Email is probably the best. So it's Rachel, just E-L, period, McIntire, at sacredsf.edu or org. Are we
ORG.
Oh, we're org, okay.
SecretSF.org, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. Ms. McIntire, thank you so much for joining this episode and sharing your story.
Thank you, Fred. It's so nice to chat.
Thank you for listening to the Teaching Bites podcast at www.teachingbites.com.